Okay, we're live. Hey, Dalton.
Hey Sam, thanks for having me, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited to do this. So I wanted to start things off. When we got connected, you had mentioned that you do something you call empathetic selling, and that really
Yeah,
intrigued me. So tell me more about what that means, empathetic selling.
sure. Empathetic selling in a nutshell is stepping away from like the old school, like younger guy sale of like hard
Mm,
closing, lots of psychology tactics that people see from a mile away now. We're
mm,
in a environment where even if you're not a salesperson, you can tell right away when someone's trying to sell you something and no one likes it. So there's an old
mm,
book by Jeffrey Gitmer called um, "The Little Red Book of Selling," and in that he coins a phrase which states, "Everybody wants to buy, but nobody wants to be sold."
okay, I've
And
heard that. Yeah.
yeah. So it's a great sales book. I really enjoy it. But the essentially what it is empathetic selling is kind of the balance between like, look, salespeople are results oriented. Deals shouldn't take a year. Like, how do we balance getting deals efficiently? Like, like taking advantage of lead velocity, which is by when a lead comes in between when they're sold. Like, how quickly can we close that gap? Because like money loves speed. But how can we
Mm,
balance that with not treating people like numbers, making helping people feel seen and heard, and then really understanding what we're dealing with. And so some sales processes take one call, and some sales processes that I've been part of take 6 months, right? So it all really just depends on your sale. But empathetic selling is the balance between like results oriented and then taking care of people.
wow. Okay. So does empathetic selling, is that like covert operations, like trying to be sneaky about actually selling
Yeah.
them? What does that mean?
So listen. Yeah. It's a good question. So there's a semantic difference between
Mm,
manipulation and persuasion.
mm,
Manipulation would mean that I'm trying to get you to do something for my benefit. Persuasion would mean that I'm trying to get you to do something for your benefit.
mm.
And it's a pretty gray area when you're dealing with like hard closing, but essentially we try to persuade and influence people, right? That's why like everybody loves How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Mm.
It's not manipulation when you're, and one of my favorite books is The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. One of the laws of power is appeal to others' self-interest. People do things for themselves and not for you. That's why
Mm.
podcasting is so cool, right? Because you can never get a meeting with somebody until you ask them to come talk about themselves for 60 minutes, then they'll jump at the bit, right?
Sure.
And that's the idea behind it. So manipulation, right? And so then it comes back to intention. So why are you actually trying to get this deal? Is it because you genuinely think you can help somebody and that they'll be better off with your solution? Or is you just need to make a quick buck?
Mm.
One is manipulation, the other one is influence and persuasion.
I love how you say that. One of my favorite quotes, I believe it's from Dwight D. Eisenhower. He says, "The art of leadership is getting others to do what you need done because they want to do it."
Yeah.
So, taking that broader, how do you see, like, I mean, we're talking about like the sales environment, but even more
Sure.
broadly in an organization, how do you use those principles for building influence in leadership?
Sure. I think it's super interesting when you talk about this concept. And the concept is that all right, let me back up. I've been doing my podcast for over 3 years. I've interviewed
Mm,
over 300 founders and CEOs. I've got like over 400 hours of recordings. One of the things that I've noticed during all of that is what makes you successful in one area of your life sets you up for success in another area. So we've all heard the term like everybody's a salesperson, right?
mm,
And then we just act differently. So you're selling in a job interview, you're selling in a leadership position, you're selling as a parent, you're selling as a spouse, like, and so these principles of like how do you help somebody understand your position and then move on that position. So you got your MBA. I also got my MBA. My concentration was in strategy and teams.
Mm.
And a principle of teamwork is that you can buy-in can occur without what's the without everybody being on board. There's a word for it, but I can't
Uh,
think of it right now. But buy-in
mm.
can occur without everybody being on the same page. Like if you feel like if you're in a meeting and your leader says, "Hey, we need some ideas on how to, 10x revenue," and he goes around and he asks everybody for their opinion, right? Uh, Somebody's going to win, and eventually the leader's going to have to make a decision, and not all 10 ideas are going to win, most likely. But
Mm.
if you let people talk and you let them pitch their idea and you help them feel seen and heard, even though nothing worked, even though my idea didn't get picked, I felt like I contributed. I felt like you heard me. Maybe I was persuaded. Maybe I still think I'm right, but you know what? He took the time to listen to me. She took the time to hear me out. And so that's fine, right? And if we got to go back to the drawing board again, I know that I'm going to be heard and I know that I'm going to be listened to. And consensus is the word, sorry. So buy-in
Mm.
can
Mm.
occur without consensus. And that's the same thing with kids. That's the same thing with spouses. Like, as long as people understand, and I know you're in the relationship world, right? So I'm sure you have a similar viewpoint on that, which is like, look, um, look, at the end of the day, we need to make a decision. Somebody's going to have to drop the hammer on this. But if I know that at least I've been talked to and communicated with, I can do it. So that, yeah, hopefully that answers your question. But that's
Yeah.
a big one. That's a big part of this. So whether you're in a
Mm.
job interview, whether you're in this, selling with empathy and really understanding the other party and where they come from is a huge deal in negotiation, in anything, right?
Yeah. What are some simple things that someone can practice to be more empathetic in how they're trying to reach consensus or get a deal done?
Yeah. This is one of my favorites. So I'm going to bring up the 48 Laws of Power. It's not a super
Mm.
popular book with people. A lot of people think this book is like manipulating, but here's the deal. It's not. You just have to play the game. Like, these are
Mm.
rules that like are just at this point, like, we know they're undeniable, right? One of them is speak less. So I think if you want to start developing empathy for people and you want to start hearing people, stop talking. Let them
Mm.
talk. Let them organize their thoughts and defend their position. And then when you get to the point where, you need to talk, you have a lot more information. So speak less and then say less than what's necessary, right? You want to like leave the door open for them to talk and give you a lot of information, right? Because people tell you how they want to buy. Like, the problem is
Mm.
salespeople just don't listen, right?
That's interesting. I
Yeah.
recall there was a study done that found the single best predictor of career trajectory, basically getting into senior leadership. The single best predictor of that is not results necessarily, it's not
Yeah.
education, it's how much you talk.
Yeah.
And so, as an introvert, as someone who thinks and listens more naturally than speaks up, I see
Yeah.
these different sides of the equation where you could see for extroverts who are probably more naturally going to be in leadership roles, it's
Yeah.
important to learn to listen more. But for the introvert, what would you say to them to practice speaking up more?
Sure. I think it's timing, right?
Mm.
And here's what I would say with speaking up more. And I think a lot of introverts are going to like this because I mentioned this as the second rule, which is say less than is necessary. And this is all from
Mm.
Robert Greene. I didn't come up with
Sure.
this myself. It's not an original idea, but it's helped me because like I'm an
Mm.
extrovert, right? And I have ADHD. So that means I dominate conversations and I interrupt people constantly, right?
Mm.
So I've had to learn how to scale back, and I've had to learn how to like just say, just say exactly what is necessary and nothing more.
Mm.
So I think for introverts, that's a good tool because you do have to speak up, but you don't have to go on rants, and you don't have to be necessarily very polished, and you don't have to like try to like insert yourself, in a dominant way. You can speak up, say exactly what's necessary to be said, and then you don't have to talk anymore. And it creates a lot of like it creates a lot of like FOMO around you and like mystery and
Okay.
things like that, right? You know what I mean? But people genuinely understand, like, you don't need a lot. You don't need to say a lot be to speak up and to be heard.
Sure. I will corroborate that in saying there have been times where it's been said of me that when he speaks up I know to listen because he doesn't speak up as much. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
So
mean, that's a good tool to have, by the way, because you don't speak so much. It's valuable when it comes out.
mm,
Yeah,
mm.
that's great.
Tell me more about Robert Greene, because you had mentioned like you
Yeah.
have your perspective on him, and
Uh,
I'm inclined to agree that his stuff I've had some frustrations because, like you said, it can seem like manipulation, and he's talking about these Machiavellian principles of life. But at the same time, I've come to a better understanding, I feel, of what he's trying to get at, in the sense that there are just some realities to life.
mhm.
It's just things as they are. He's not saying how they should be, but it's
Right.
as they are. So tell me more about what you've seen and how his philosophy or others have influenced your perspective.
Yeah. So at the end of the 48 Laws of Power, so you go through all 48. And then at the end of the book, he says, throw all of these rules out the window and just live your life. And
Hmm.
it's interesting because sometimes you do need to say more than is necessary. Sometimes you do need to speak up and you need to dominate the conversation and you need to get your words in. Sometimes you do need to outshine the master.
Hmm.
Sometimes you do need to do these things. And so at the end of the book, I think and it's always funny because it's kind of like we get caught up in all the laws that he talks about, but at the end of the book, I mean, it's pretty clear. It's really short though, so a lot of people miss it. But he
Hmm.
goes, he goes like, just throw it all out, forget everything that I just told you, and like try to navigate this. But it's good to know like when some things are happening, because there are people out there who try to manipulate you, and if you can see it coming, and if you want to like have influence. So for example, like, all right, there was Robert Greene's writing assistant and researcher when he was doing a lot of these books was Ryan Holiday, who's a like
Hmm.
a great author, stoic
Right.
author, marketing author. He was the writing assistant for Robert Greene. And he talks about Ryan Holiday talks about his time at American Apparel, I think, when he had the
Hmm.
48 Laws of Power sitting on his book, or the book sitting on his desk, and his boss would walk by and see the book sitting on his desk. And eventually Ryan gets fired,
Hmm.
even though he's doing great, because he messed up one of the rules, which was never outshine the master. Like, this guy kept thinking, his boss kept walking by thinking every day that he was going to get fired. Like, Ryan Holiday is trying to, but it's just, no, he's just reading a book, man. He was actually a
Hmm.
research assistant for this guy and he was reading his book, right? But like, there you go. That's one of them, of like this
Right.
whole idea that like people in power. And so I read this, I have a really good friend, John Bradshaw, who deals with a lot of like venture capital and private equity here in Utah. He wrote a tweet that said, if you could speak to 20 CEOs, you would immediately you would immediately understand that like everybody has imposter syndrome.
Hmm.
You would immediately see that these guys are extremely insecure. And so like insecurity doesn't hide from anybody. And so when you're dealing with somebody who has a lot of power and they're insecure on any side of the spectrum, you have to deal with that relationship kind of delicately. But not knowing that and trying to like dominate the conversation, trying to, do all of these things that we think are like, I'm just being real, I'm just being me. It's not going to work. A lot of the times it's just, you're not going to be the guy. You know what I mean?
Hmm. And isn't
So
that
yeah.
funny? I've found in building my career, and I'm sure many others have experienced similar things, where the more junior guy or girl just wants to put their best foot forward, and it ends up threatening the person above them, and it has the
Yeah.
opposite effect.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's I think that's like, dude, I think that's rule number one, law number one, which is
Mm-hmm.
don't outshine your master. And dude, it sucks. Like, yeah, I wish that every leader was like Sam, who would like take opinions into consideration, who would let me feel seen and heard, who would hear me out, and who would say, hey, you know what, I had never thought of that, junior sales rep. Like, that's a great idea. We're going to implement that, and I'm going to give you all the credit. That doesn't
Mm,
happen ever. Like, rarely does that happen, especially on a sales floor.
sure. So
That's it.
what has helped you personally with moving from insecurity to that more open style of leadership?
Yeah, it's tough, dude, because I'm still pretty insecure, and so
Sure.
and when you have insecure people dealing with insecure people, that throws gas on the fire.
Mm,
What's helped me though is I have like for personally, I have a super one of my super strong mantras is like, I don't need anybody else to help me make money. So if I'm open in
mm,
a conversation and a junior person comes up and says, hey, I have this idea, and I go, oh, that's a great idea, and I go, we implement it or whatever, it doesn't affect me, because let's say somebody's like, well, Dalton should have thought of that. She's in, Dalton's out. That's fine, dude. Like, before, like, my boss could call me right now, and I've said this before, and a lot of people think it's super cocky, but my boss could call me right now, interrupt this podcast, and say you're fired, and I'd have a job before I walked out that door.
mm,
So I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter
yeah.
to me. I have my network's too deep.
Mm,
My confidence in my skills is too strong that, like, even if I had like a mix up like that, it wouldn't work. But also, here's the other thing. Some people don't have that. So what do people do if they're not like me? How do you become more open? Right? Well, empathy doesn't mean that I like give in and do all these things, right?
mm,
uh, Having empathy for other people means like setting boundaries and being very open and clear about my decisions. So I might say, hey, look, I want to hear your position, but I'm going to be totally upfront with you and transparent, Sam. Like, I have an idea in my head that I really think that we should try, and I'll level with you that if it doesn't work, give me 2 weeks and then we'll try yours. Like, you can even say that up front, and then you still will give me your idea, and then we'll still go to work. Like,
mm, mm,
you know what I mean? So you being open and stuff like that, and then just not, I don't know, just also being aware of everything that's going around you. I think self-awareness is a big one.
sure. Well,
Yeah.
self-awareness is a big topic for me. I view it as self-awareness, I say, is the currency with which you buy a better version of yourself. And a lot
Yeah.
of people are poor when it comes to self-awareness. They
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
afford it.
Well,
It takes some work to get there.
yeah, I heard the sad guru say that even though your mouth is right under your nose, it still takes somebody else to tell you that you have bad breath.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And you go like, dude, that's tough, bro. And then
Right.
it's even tougher if you're dealing with your boss who's insecure, and now you got to tell him that he has bad breath because everybody else knows it, right? Like, that's tough, right? Yeah.
That's such an interesting thing because as a coach and as a consultant, often during the education process of, say, the sales process towards a coaching engagement, often what happens is people learn to develop an appreciation for having that third party in the mix, because the very definition of having a blind spot is that you're not aware of it. And so
Right.
what everyone else can see is like, wow, he's so great in all these areas, but this
Yeah.
one is really holding him back, and he doesn't seem to even know that it is. In fact, he might
Yeah.
even think that it's a strength, and then he's leaning even further into it when he shouldn't be.
Yeah, man. Oh yeah,
And
dude.
and so
Yeah.
having that neutral third party that's only there for your personal success, that is what people tend to appreciate once it clicks.
Well, and when once they were able to accept it, so let's go full circle for just a second and go back to selling, because a lot of selling is telling people that their baby's ugly, right? Like, hey,
Hmm.
like Sam, the solution you're using right now is not working, right? But you can't do that. So I mentioned a phrase from Jeffrey Gitmer at the beginning. I coined one. I don't think it's my own, but I can't remember where I got it from. But it's everybody like so. It's very similar to that saying, which is nobody wants to be taught, but everybody wants to learn.
Hmm.
Like I don't want to, you know what I mean? Like I want to feel like I'm learning. I don't want to feel like I'm being lectured at, right?
Hmm.
So how do
Yeah.
you change a conversation between a lecture and a pitch to a conversation? A lot of like questions, a lot of like probing and things like that, right? Because um, yeah, you eventually I don't want to tell you that your baby's ugly, but you need to know that. And so the only way for you to actually believe that, and I'm using this as an example, it's just
Yeah.
obviously no
Right.
one's
Right.
baby's ugly,
My
right?
kids
But
are beautiful.
yeah, exactly. I know. But you know what I mean? But like your baby, I mean like your business, like your whole
Right.
process that you've created is like beautiful, you think, but I got to tell you that it's broken.
Right.
You have to come to that realization on your own. So I can lead you down that path with questions to help us realize, to help you realize on your own that this is the case, right? So that's why empathy is a great tool to use with just persuading other people um, to your way, right? Or
Hmm.
to realize something's not working, right? So if there's a leader whose whole team hates him, right?
Hmm.
You might go up to that leader and be like, "Hey, I had a question. Like, when was the last time your one of your teammates, one of your direct reports, came up and asked you a question?" And if they didn't like you, you're probably going to say, "Oh, it's been a long time." You go, "Well, that's really interesting because I just heard Sally say that they were having troubles, but I'm sure that there's something. I mean, could you help me out with that? Like, what do you think?" And then they're going to give me some crazy. But you see, like now we're not. He's got to think now. Questions make you justify your position.
Okay. Well, and to go along with that, Miranda and I had been working with a couple years ago, and what was happening was they were getting their process of creating an idea, moving it, like winnowing down the things that wouldn't work about it and getting it towards execution. They were getting
Yeah.
all that jumbled up. So they were coming up with ideas and judging them at the same time. And that to me illustrates that you can't be curious and judgmental at the same time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
You got to be open for sure.
yeah. And to me, that has been one of the most obvious ways that I've caught myself in redirecting towards openness,
Yeah.
because it can be easy when you are stressed out, all the things going on in your day and your week, to, for whatever reason, survival mode tends to just go to judgment and then just
Yeah.
preserving your energy. But
Yeah.
typically, the thing that actually gives you energy back is being open, and that requires
Yeah.
curiosity.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and if you're trying to persuade somebody into that curiosity mindset, like I mentioned, questioning them in a good way. Now, questions come down to body language, tone,
Mm,
and stuff like that. But yeah, questioning somebody's position makes them defend it, and if they can't defend it, you're not the person who's telling them that they're struggling with it, and so then the conversation can start to flow the way that you need it to, and that's what empathetic selling is. That's like the whole
mm.
game. Yeah.
That's great, because again, so much of what good coaching and consulting looks like in my experience is, like you're saying, it's leading them down the path. And I, maybe there's some semantics there we could
Sure.
flesh out, because leading sounds like manipulation, but
Sure.
there's a conversation that you can walk together down to help
Yeah.
them develop that self-awareness, for them to then see, oh, here's my blind
Yeah.
spot, let's do something about it.
Right. And listen, I don't ever defend salespeople. If you go on my TikTok, I have empathetic selling on on TikTok. Whenever somebody calls out salespeople, I will stitch that comment and be like, look, we deserve this comment. Like
Mm,
salespeople are tolerated. right? Like that's a hard truth because salespeople have earned that title so long that a lot of bad salespeople get that. So I don't defend salespeople, but I do flip it over to the other side on the same coin, because if you think every conversation is you're being manipulated to some level, like you got to look inside.
Hmm.
Like not everybody's trying to manipulate you. If we're all out for our own self-interest, right? Then I'm not, a lot of the times these conversations aren't to manipulate you. And that's kind of that. So one way to step into openness, stop thinking everybody's trying to manipulate you, because most likely they're not. I
Hmm.
mean, be careful, but like, I don't know, dude. If you could you imagine that, right? Think about how your conversations would be different, because I actually have a cool story about this with a salesperson that I used to train.
Hmm.
Like, think about how different your conversations would be with your wife if you thought that every time she talked to you, she was trying to manipulate you.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah.
wouldn't be the same,
Not good.
right?
No.
Yeah. And so now imagine, now that's you and your wife, but now imagine like some stranger on the street, anybody that you meet. You think that everybody's trying to manipulate you. Your conversations are pretty hostile,
Hmm.
right? I had a salesperson who came up to me and he was like, every customer that I talk to is a douche. And I was like, well, dude, I've been
Okay.
doing this for so long. Like 1 out of 10 maybe is a douche. Like there are some genuine people who don't like whatever. So fine. We don't need to sell to those people. We got 9 more shots. And I was like, well, so I shadowed him. I was like, well, what are you doing, man? Let me check this out. And he was treating people like they were going to be douchebags to him. Does
Hmm.
that make sense?
Yeah.
He was like already defending himself because he was like preemptively expecting that conversation to go bad. And so when you think like that, of course people are going to be douchebags, because your whole tone, your entire body is showing this defensive position, and our primal brains don't know the difference between somebody who's new and scared versus somebody who's actually trying to do us harm. Like those triggers on our body are almost identical.
Hmm.
And so I was like, well, dude, start treating people like they can buy from you, and start treating people like they're not going to be douchebags to you. He did that. It took a little bit of work, but he did that. His sales went up 10 times.
Wow.
You know,
So simple.
it's a hard mindset, but yeah.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, one thing I love about the coaching approach is that it's taking the present and moving it into the future. Just
Yeah.
being future focused. It's different from therapy because that's about dealing with how the past informs the present.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just take this question and let me ask you, for someone who has developed a, to them at least, a significant pile of evidence that people are going to treat me this particular way, and it's
Yeah.
not helpful for them to believe that. What does that kind of conversation look like to lead them towards a better look, a better
Yeah.
thought?
So yeah. Now look, there are some things in life that like people are trying, like, you know, when you talk about, maybe like I do a lot of work with like women in business and like
Mm.
women in sales. And so, yeah, women are treated differently in sales. Right.
Mm.
So, and I've had this conversation a million times on my podcast. How do you balance accountability, right, and responsibility with the opposite side, that people are actually going to try to derail you from this, right? So like
Mm.
if you're a woman in sales, it's going to be kind of tough. If you're the only woman on the sales floor, it's going to be pretty tough for you. I wish it was different, right? And this is the exercise that I take people through, right? I genuinely wish it was different, and I actively try to fix this.
Mm.
But I also tell the women that I work with in sales that is all going to happen, and you still got to go. Like, you know, this is not your fault, but you still have to fight. You know what I mean? And like, easy for me to say, right? I'm a dude. I'm Hawaiian, but I'm light skinned, right? So I'm a dude who's really good at sales, who looks like a sales guy, right? And whatever that means. I'm just trying to.
Sure.
So essentially, you're like playing into the prejudices. I'm trying to like paint that picture right now. But I have a lot of friends in every, all types of races and people who sell, who are like genuinely
Mm.
good salespeople. But like, this is the example that I'm using, which is, even though you're going to have these prejudices in front of you, you've still got to accept responsibility. So one of my favorite books is The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F by Mark Manson.
Mm. I've heard of that. Yeah.
And it's a really good book if you can get past the F words.
Right. Right.
It's a very good book. But in there, he talks about how it's not your fault, but it's still your responsibility.
Mm.
So that's the mindset shift that I try to help people with, that I try to go through, right? Is like, it's not your fault, but it's still your responsibility. Because I know plenty of women who have thrived, and even though it's been like way harder for them, they've been able to do it despite everything going against them. And we need that, right? Like, you
Mm.
still have a responsibility to like go badass, and then you pick up a lot of friends, like, then you pick up a lot of allies up on the way, like me, right? Like, I I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't mess around in the sales world. Like, if you can get sales, then you're good. I try to give everybody the same amount of training. I try to give them the exact same training. I try to personalize it to them as much as I can, and then sales speaks for themselves. So
Mm.
it's not your fault, but it's still your responsibility.
Yeah. And how does that phrase tie in with empathy? Because it can be so easy to feel like these are opposed. Like
Yeah.
you had mentioned before, that empathy doesn't mean a lack of boundaries or
Right.
anything like that. How do you get towards that healthier definition of empathy while still wanting to connect with others and maintain boundaries at the same time?
Yeah, dude. I just wrote a post about this on Facebook. It was about forgiveness.
Hmm.
And a lot of people, I had a lot of people agree with me. I had a lot of people get mad at me because I said forgiveness is not a gift you give someone else; it's a gift you give yourself.
Hmm.
And same thing with like empathy. It's really not for anybody else; it's for you, dude. Like, I was a crisis counselor, so I learned this principle once when I was a crisis counselor for the crisis text line. So it's the suicide hotline, but instead of calling in, people text in.
Wow.
And we would get texts on every range of the spectrum. I got texts from, I'm just not having a good day, want someone to talk to like, I have it in my hand ready to go.
Hmm.
And we had to like use empathy on both ends to get them to a cool place, right?
Hmm.
And this is all I would say here, is that you don't have to entertain any. So like in this case, like, right, so like boundaries, so like forgiveness is a good example for this. Forgiveness doesn't mean that I have to invite my family over anymore. Doesn't mean I have to hang out with you every day. It can mean that I delete your number out of my phone and never talk to you again. That can be part of forgiveness, right? But it's not about you. It's not about me forgiving you.
Hmm.
It's about me letting go and moving forward and doing and accepting the reality of whatever I have to do to live a happy life, right? So that's essentially, and that's kind of what empathy is, right? Like, I don't have
Hmm.
to, it's empathy for myself just as much as it is for someone else, right? So if like someone's harming me, empathy might be not talking to them. Empathy might be saying like, hey, dude, like, we can't have this conversation right now. I'm not ready for it. I totally understand you want to reach out right now. I can't do that. Have a great day. And then whatever, right? Like,
Hmm.
empathy doesn't mean, it's not a nice word. It's a very tactful word, right? It's not a woo woo
Sure.
principle.
Hmm. Sure.
Because I could look, if you ever get me in a negotiation and we're dealing with a lot of money, the conversations I have with executives might not sound empathetic to you.
Hmm.
Like, you might
Right.
replay those and be like, man, these guys are being assholes to each other. You know what I mean? Like, these guys are mean, right? But like, that's so empathy doesn't necessarily have a tone, or the tone can switch, right?
Okay. Interesting. Well, and I like that you bring up negotiation, because you say everything is sales. I think
Sure.
everything's negotiation. That's part of it.
Yeah.
And when I was studying that and practicing that, especially during business school, the thing I discovered is that there may be a lot of people more like you coming from, I don't know, just a more
Yeah.
aggressive attitude towards these things, and that's not. It's just the typical way of doing it. But the more I
Yeah.
read about it and practiced it, the more I realized like everyone is teaching. All the research shows and is teaching people to get towards collaboration, to get
Yeah.
towards a win-win kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I always found that much simpler for me. Like, just tell me what you want. I'll tell you what I want, and let's see what we can
Yeah.
do.
And then we'll go from there. Yeah.
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 And
For sure.
obviously, depending on the complexity of the situation, there's going to be things that the other party's never going to tell you. But like you're saying, it being a principle that you live by, empathy, or just leading with your best foot, that I see as being very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the whole idea of negotiating, because you negotiate a ton, man. And so there's ways to do this, but I think the key to negotiating is disarming people. And the way that you disarm somebody is by saying something that they're not ready for, or like, or they're not expecting it, right? Like a pattern interrupt. It's like when you're
Mm.
watching a video on TikTok, you're probably going to watch the TikTok that has a lot of transitions because it's interrupting
Mm.
your mental pattern, and now you're sucked in because you're watching. It feels like, so. Do you, like, you got kids? You kids watch
Yeah.
Bluey?
Yeah. Yeah. We
You
watched
love
Bluey.
Bluey? Okay. Here's a crazy statistic of why Bluey's so, and like other TV shows, like kid shows. And this is also, it's really cool, but it's also terrifying.
Mm.
Bluey has like 300 transitions an episode,
Whoa.
meaning that it's switching scenes. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
The episodes are like 15 minutes, bro. They're not that
Yeah.
much.
Wow.
You go boom, 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 right? People need to like, because I'm not watching something new, but my eyes are telling my brain that it's new. And so that's why I'm staying, because like it's new, right? Like, so when you're in
Mm.
a negotiation, how do you keep somebody like locked in and ready to go? A lot of pattern interrupts, a lot of like disarming, right? Because those two things kind of go together. So it might
Mm.
be like, you might say like, one of my favorite examples is like, I don't have enough time. So you might be like, hey, Sam, hey, Dalton, I don't have enough time. And I'd be like, cool, Sam, I don't either. So if you let me ask just two questions real quick, I'll know if we're a good fit in 30 seconds. And if we're not, I'll let you go. Sound good? You're like, oh,
Mm.
I was expecting the salesperson to say, oh, give me 15 minutes. I swear I'll make it all work.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, yeah. Or like, Sam, I don't know if or like Dalton, I don't know if your company's a good fit. I don't think it is either, Sam, to be honest with you. But I'll tell you what, if I can ask just a couple questions real quick, I'll let you know. And if we're not a good fit, I'm out and you'll never hear from me again. Sound good? You're like, oh, that's weird. Why would he say that? Right.
Yeah.
Now I'm intrigued. Now it's a pattern interrupt. It's a transition, and it's not something I'm used to. So I'm going to keep going. So anyway,
That's very interesting. I mean, and you talk about it in the sales conversation. A parallel I see is within organizations talking up the ladder, where
yeah,
people want to give all the information that they think is relevant to the ask, and it
yeah,
ends up being overload. That's not what the person above them needs or wants. And there's this disconnect between, I'm trying to lead with my best foot, but I'm not actually giving them what they need or want.
yeah, dude. I tell people all the time to not, like, you don't need to tell everybody all the features that you offer. You don't need to run through a pitch deck that says this is everything that you get. You actually only need to tell them enough. You only need to give them enough information for them to buy. And again, this isn't manipulation. This is human beings. If I have 15 options, I'm not going to choose any of them. In and Out is so popular because why? Like, they only have 3 items on the menu,
Yeah.
6 items on the menu. They have a secret menu if you're cool and kept from California. But
Sure.
got like 6. They got 6 items on the menu, and you know what you're going to get and they're consistent, right? You know what you're going to get every time. Like, how many times do you go to McDonald's and order something new? I never go to McDonald's and order something new.
I've gotten the same orders since I was like 10. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's right. There you go. Right. Like
Yeah.
it's people love, you have to balance novelty and familiarity. And that's very difficult in sales.
Mm-hmm. Given the conversation we've had so far, I'm curious to know if you could boil down, if you could boil down Dalton, who
Sure.
you are, what you represent, what you're here to do in life. How would you summarize that?
Yeah, man. I feel like I have this is my biggest purpose in life is a contrarian. That's my
Mm.
purpose in life. So like I'm a member of the LDS church, but I got a big tattoo. And this
I
tattoo
saw
has
that. Yeah.
this tattoo was I'm Hawaiian, but it's
Mm.
big. It goes all the way up,
Mm.
right? This tattoo's actually helped more people come back to into the church than anything else in the world. And
Wow.
this has opened more conversations for me to like help people understand what I think we really believe. And it's because I would have never been able to do any of that if I didn't have this. It's a
Wow.
pattern interrupt. It's a transition. It's something different. Like you're like, I didn't think this big bald guy with a beard who looks really scary could be like this crazy, right? And so sales is the same way. Like I never like I'm always, if we're in a sales thing conversation, I'm always gonna like try to like be contrarian and very counterintuitive. Like that's my approach to life. Like that's what I think more people should take advantage of is like it's okay to be like it's okay for this not to make sense. Like one of my favorite sales questions to ask is why won't you buy this? So Sam, like, you know, I'm selling you my coaching, right? I might be like, all right, Sam, so I'm just curious, like what would make you not want to move forward with this? Like if you saw something in here, like what would you see in here that you'd be like, hell no, dude, I'm never going to do that. And we'd talk about that.
Mm.
And I would make you, and I would not make you, but I would encourage you to answer that, right? Like I would not let you say like, oh dude, there's nothing you could say that wouldn't make me buy. Cause you're lying to me. There's something in here that,
Sure.
right? Like, why haven't you bought it in the past? Like, and these are things like, it doesn't make any sense. And I also in sales, I also ask about competition. Like, all right, Sam, so, you know, we're at the end of this. I'm sure you're looking at other sales trainers. I wish I was the only one, but I'm not. Right.
Mm.
What else have you looked at and how have you felt about them? Right. Like, I'm going to bring up that in like the first 5 minutes we talk.
Sure.
Because
yeah. And
it's different.
when you talk about substitutes, right? The biggest, baddest substitute that anyone making any sort of ask has to overcome is why don't I just not do anything?
Yeah, the status quo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Overcoming the status quo for sure. Dude, and that by the way is a big one. Like, dude, I'm kind of doing fine without sales training. I don't really need any. You just like, and so I guess one of the ways that you can look at this too is agreeableness. So just agreeing with them, like, yeah, dude, you're killing it, dude, by yourself. I was actually surprised we got on the call, Sam. I was actually surprised you were interested, right? Like, and I use that, and we kind of laugh and stuff like that. But I like humor in sales. Humor is very tricky, though. You have to be very. Anybody can do it, but you got to be careful.
Sure. Yeah. You have to know your audience. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say the contrarian is your word, but you also talk about agreeableness. So tell me more about how those fit together.
Well, yeah, I think most people want to like go against the grain and like go against the mold. I think a lot of people want to do that. They just need permission. Right? They need to see somebody else doing what they want to do, and then they're comfortable taking the leap. And so you just need one person who doesn't care about what other people think most of the time. Like we all care about what other people think about us, but you need someone who has a higher threshold for not caring to like to see to show you that like it's actually not that bad, and now you're in, right?
Yeah, I'll say that in my personal experience doing my own thing, entrepreneurial, helping others externally, I've gotten a lot of comments that are like, wow, I'm just so impressed that you're doing this stuff. And behind the scenes, I'm like, I'm struggling, man.
Terrified. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
we're all insecure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
Yeah. 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 I think, but as you, even if, you get that tribe around you,
Hmm.
you become a little more, a little more confident and courageous in what you can do. And I think that, I mean, changing the world through empathy is part of it, is just being that contrarian, like counterintuitive approach to life. So like, and there's so many that exist in our life that we just don't understand, that we don't grasp until someone points it out to us. So one of the big ones is like, so that book I mentioned by Mark Manson, the first chapter is called Don't Try. And you're like, what the heck? But
Hmm.
it's actually, when you see it in real life, you're like, holy shit, I get it. And you go like, and this is it, right? This is the, to illustrate this point perfectly. Do you golf, Sam?
I
You ever
have
been
golfed.
golfing?
I wouldn't call myself a golfer.
Okay. But you go golfing.
Yeah.
If I
I know
put
the
you on a
game.
golf course, you could see if someone was trying too hard.
Oh, yes.
You could be like, oh my gosh, dude, you're like you're trying way too hard. You're like,
Sure.
But to master the game of golf, you have to get into flow, just like anything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Well,
not
and that,
trying; it's
that
actually
reminds
not
me of
caring.
what you were saying earlier with Robert Greene saying, throw away my book after you read
Yeah,
it, basically.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just live.
I work with a bunch of businesses, and we do podcasts. And I was working with one host, and we went through I prepped him on how to interview and how to ask questions and all that. And then I said at the end, I was like, all right, now forget everything that I just told you. Take a deep breath, forget everything I just told you, and go have fun.
Hmm.
And then we'll be fine. So like, what's the point of that though, right? Like, why would we go through all of that teaching, and then why would someone end with, but you know what? Just have fun, just be yourself, make it unique, right? Because this is like a universal truth, right? The difference between me and Sam, the only difference between me and Sam is that I'm me and you're Sam.
Right. The only difference is
That's it.
everything. Yeah.
Right. Like, yeah, like that's it. Right. So when you sell, like when I was selling tech, when I was selling software, dude, all of this software was the same. I don't care.
Hmm.
Like, it's the same. Like, there's a little bit of difference here. And one of my favorite sayings is, where there is no difference, there can be no preference.
Hmm.
But what's the biggest difference? Me, dude. That's it.
Hmm.
Go be you. Have fun. Like, enjoy it. Let people come into your light. Like, I don't like that whole old sales tactic of like match people's energy. Because bro, I
Okay.
want to bring you up to my level, bro. I want to bring you up
Hmm.
to me. I don't want to, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to, like, and I'm not saying, because in a sales conversation, somebody can be more quiet
Sure.
and then and if you're more stoic, like match that. Like, I'm stoic, but I'm upbeat, dude. Like, I'm gonna be happy. I'm gonna make you laugh. Like, I'm a comedian, dude.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I get
Yeah.
people to laugh who never laugh.
Wow.
And and so like, that's why though. But yeah, dude, I think that's probably the biggest piece, is like, once you have all that information, you have all the tools in your belt, you become more aware. And so you can pull them out when you need them. But at the end of the day, just go be you, dude. To feel it out. Like, every situation is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like how you said, most often people just need to give themselves permission.
Mm.
And that relates to courage. And I find it so
Yeah.
ironic that we're looking for permission. We're looking for usually something external, somebody
Yeah.
setting the example. So like, okay, well, I could do something like that, and
Right.
trying it out, taking the leap back into just being ourselves. That
Right.
we need so much courage just to be ourselves. What's been your experience toward that in your life?
Just like giving yourself permission to be yourself.
Yeah,
Um, Sorry, give me just 1 second, dude.
no problem.
Okay, cool. Giving yourself permission to be yourself. Here's what I think. Again, it just comes back to like, people love you for you. Like, people want you.
Mm.
That's what I think people need to understand. Like, they want you, dude. Like, I remember I had a really special experience, like when I was in high school, where this, I'm going to be kind of mean, but it's going to get my point across. But this kid was
Okay.
ugly, dude. He was ugly.
Okay.
He was not athletic. He was bigger. There was no reason this kid should be popular. None. Like, on paper, this kid
Mm.
should be an outcast. Everybody loved him. Girls
Mm.
were all over him. He was the most popular kid in school. And you know why? Because he freaking embraced everything.
Mm.
He embraced himself and put himself out there on the line, and people loved it, dude. And he made people laugh, and he had the worst acne I'd ever seen. He was on like special medication for Like,
Wow.
I'm not trying to be mean, but like I'm painting this picture. Think of the nerdiest kid in school, and I was watching the because I was a varsity football player, varsity wrestler, very decorated as far as, like, you know, my Letterman jacket. Like, I mean, everything
Mm-hmm.
on paper, I should have been a popular kid, but I was super insecure. I was going after all these things because I thought that's what people liked. But this kid shows up, class president. Like, dude, this kid had no business being in
Wow.
the position that he was in the social spectrum of our high school.
Sure.
But you know what? But he loved himself, dude. And everybody loved that. People were missing that in themselves. They were like, dude, if this guy can love himself the way that he is, like, I have no business not loving myself.
Mm.
And people were so drawn to him because they were yearning for that in themselves. And he killed it. He crushed it.
Mm.
He's still popular, and he works at Domino's in my hometown, dude.
Wow.
And he crushes it. I mean, he's so happy. Like, you don't need a lot to be happy in life. That's another conversation we have.
Sure.
But dude, it's crazy.
My gosh, that reminds me of a mantra that Miranda and I remind ourselves of often. It goes, "There's nothing too big to forgive, and there's nothing too small to celebrate." And I think so often, especially personally speaking, we can set ourselves up to become better, to like pursue a goal where it comes down to I don't accept myself instead.
Right.
So learning to celebrate even the smallest things are one of the big things that we help everyone with.
Amen.
But I want to wrap things up and just thank you and let you send us off with any last words.
Yeah, dude. No, I'm grateful that I got to be here and talk, man. I talk way too much, but this was a great podcast, dude. You're killing it. I love it. Dude, if anybody wants to follow me, you can go Dalton K. Jensen, pretty much on any social media platform, and daltonkjensen.com. But thank you, dude.
Awesome. Thank you, Dalton. Take care. Okay.